All right, guys, now that we can see some particles in our viewport, let's go ahead and get most of this application all wrapped up.
Right. Add some user control in here.
Yeah, so that we can adjust these various parameters of the particles in real time.
Yep.
So let's do it.
All right. Now we're about to do a lot of typing, so
yes.
brace yourselves for massive amounts of typing. The first thing we're going to do is create a whole bunch of sliders. Now, basically, we want a slider that will control many of the properties that can be found in our emitter.
That's right.
So we'll start out with a slider pointer. There's going to be quite a few of these, so let me just copy and paste this many times. Don't know exactly how many, but we're going to have a life range, SLD size, SLD size range, SLD spread, SLD saturation,
emission radius. Rate, emission rate, SLD gravity, SLD wind X, wind Y, and wind Z.
Yeah. And finally a vortex and an alpha.
That's right.
Wow. So there we have all the controls necessary. Well, most of them.
Most.
Remember, we want 2 extra list boxes that allow us to select which texture is applied to that emitter and a list of emitters that we can create. And that also brings up buttons, but we're not actually going to store those buttons in a global variable. So right up here, I'm going to create a list box, and I'll just call it list textures, and I'll default that to null. I could default all of these to null, but we're going to initialize them really soon here. So list box, list emitters equals null. We're also going to need to store all the textures that we have loaded, as well as all the emitters that we have created. So we're going to create 2 vector lists with texture pointers, and we'll just call this texture list and vector emitter pointer emitters.
Okay, so with that, do we need the emitter right above where you're right here?
Oh, yeah, we're going to just get rid of that, yeah.
And
we don't need our texture anymore because
right.
we're not going to have that cube anymore. We're not just going to have one texture, but a list of them.
That's right.
So with that, let's go ahead and create some initialization functions for these. Remember, for each of our sliders, we have our current pointer, which specifies which one we're going to be changing. Actually, this brings up another really important point, and that is we're going to have the current emitter, if you will. And I'll explain that in a second. Basically, we have our list box, right? Mm-hmm. And you can select which emitter we have currently selected.
That's right.
So we're going to need to initialize our sliders depending on which emitter is currently selected. So let me go ahead and create and update controls.
Okay.
In this function, basically what we're going to do is go through all of those sliders and update their values so that basically they point to the correct emitter's attributes.
Right.
So when you change the slider, they change the correct guy. So I'm going to create a local variable called current emitter. And of course we have our list box called list emitters, and we'll just go ahead and get the current index. So which one is currently selected. And then all we need to do is do a SLD life and set life, set value, thank you. And inside, let me just go back into our slider real quick here. Remember, we just need to pass it our float value. Mm-hmm. So if we come back into here, what we're going to need to do is pass it the address of emitter's current emitter. In fact, I can go ahead and make this even a little bit easier for us and just create current emitter. I'll just make this all wrapped up into one function here. Get our emitters, and let me just copy and paste this in here. So basically we get the current emitter that's selected. And then we'll just pass that to each of our sliders. So basically we have our current emitter, life, and then we're going to copy and paste these for every single one of these here.
Right.
So let me just copy this to have as a reference. So let me paste this down here so I can make sure I get every single one. So I'll just copy and paste a few of these. So we have our life range, our size range, our spread, our saturation. Saturation, thank you. And let me copy a few of these. a few more of these. So I stopped at saturation. Let me go ahead and delete these out. So we have our emission radius, our emission rate, our gravity, our wind X, wind Y, and wind Z. And two more, our vortex and our alpha. Oh, sorry. Vortex and our alpha. Now we just need to go through this and basically set the right parameters for each of them. I'm going to kind of organize this just a little bit to right there. Just tab this over so that we can see exactly what's going on here. But that's cool.
Mm-hmm.
It's always nice to come in here and kind of clean this up just a bit. So if another programmer comes in and tries to read the code, he doesn't totally freak out.
Life range.
So we have our life range.
Size.
Our size range.
Saturation.
Saturation. Almost sounds like you're trying to rush me.
Emission rate.
Emission rate.
Emission radius. Gravity. Position.x. Position.y.
Okay. Oh wait, was this supposed to be? Oh, I'm sorry. I spelled this totally wrong here. I meant to make this an offset, slider offset X, Y, and Z.
Gotcha.
As you might remember from the demo that we show you in the intro, we actually have an offset that specifies offset for X, Y, and Z.
Okay.
And I don't know why I was thinking wind.
Gotcha.
So let me just change this around just a little bit. Hope that's not all too confusing. So basically at this point...
This is just offsetting the position of the particles.
Right.
So I'm looking down here at code, and now that I'm looking across, yeah, you're setting that to the position X, Y, and Z of the emitter itself.
Yep.
That is kind of interesting.
That is not wind. So at this point...
this allows us to move our emitter around.
Right.
Yeah.
And which is kind of cool.
So still almost, but not quite. We still have rotation.y and alpha. Bottom right.
Oh, right.
There you go.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Rotation.y and our alpha. So there we have it. Now we have set all of our values. Now we need a function that will create all of this for us. And there's quite a bit for this one as well. So in our VO'd, in our initialize, we'll just call this initialize, and we'll call this initialize. We can call this initialize controls. Basically, we're going to create all of our text, all of our controls, and set up everything that we need. So initialize our texture list and so on.
Get an emitter going, things like that.
So remember, we have our texture list, and we're going to push back a few new textures. And as we showed you before, we have a directory that contains a few test textures, if you will. So we have our data, star.tga, and we'll call this star. And we have 4 textures in total. So this one right here is going to be our flare, our flame, and our smoke. And we'll just call these the same name. And basically what's in this column right here is going to be displayed in our texture list.
That's right.
Our list box, excuse me. And finally our smoke. And then let's create a simple emitter. So let me just create a new emitter. And we'll push this onto our emitters list. And we're basically going to loop through all of these emitters in our draw scene and update them. So let me just push this onto it. Just a default one.
So you have one emitter in the scene when you launch the application.
Exactly. And then our emitter, let's go ahead and set his texture to whatever is in texture list element 0. So the first texture, which is going to be start. So we've got that set. Now we need to create all of our controls that we've set right here.
Yeah.
So again, I'm going to copy all of this. It's just tedious work, but it is kind of necessary.
Remove all of the slider on the left. Yeah. Yeah.
We need a little bit of music.
Do.
You're doing very well.
Thank you.
So inside of our slider, we're going to create you're going to use our add control. And yes, we need to typecast this over to a slider. Right. And then we use our add control function.
New slider.
So we're going to create a new slider. We're going to have to set...
label will be life. And 0.0f, comma.
And then to 10. So we can go anywhere between 0 and 10 seconds for our life.
Then we'll set 0 and 0 because position's irrelevant since we're using your add controls. 220.
Yeah.
Now you can just copy that whole piece of that line.
Yeah, let me just do that. Let me do all of this.
A lot of that's going to remain.
Right. Except I'm running out of room, so let me just kind of pull this over a little bit. There we go. Much better. Like I said, guys, a lot of code here. But if you get the idea of what's going on and you think this is really easy, awesome.
Yeah.
That's excellent. So here, this is going to be our life range.
Which is going to go from 0 to 3.
Just going to go from 0 to 3. And then we have our size, which is going to go from
10.
0 to 10. Our size range.
0 to 5.
0 to 5. And then our spread.
0 to 10.
0 to 10. Our saturation.
0 to 1.
Remember, our saturation simply goes from 0 to 1 with 1 having the random colors.
Right.
And then our emission radius.
Which is 0 to 10.
0 to 10. Emission rate.
0 to 1,000.
Right, because we do want to be able to emit a lot of particles. Our gravity.
0 to 20.
And an offset in offset in X.
Let's say we've got negative 15 to positive 15.
Right, so negative 15 to positive 15. Just copy that here. All right, so.
And the Y one's just going to be 0 to 15. Because we don't need it to go.
Here. 0 to 15, right. For our vortex?
No, go back up to offset Y.
Oh, right. Because we want to start out at 0.
We don't want them to go below the 4. Right.
Exactly. And then our vortex is going to be from...
Our vortex goes from negative 50 to a positive 50.
Negative 50 to a positive 50. And finally, our alpha is simply going to go between 0 and 1.
Okay. Had originally 0.8, but...
Yeah, okay. It was 0 to 1.
It works.
All right. And all of the sizes we're going to leave the same. So with that, we've created most of our...
We haven't added anything that's going to get in the way of a quick compile, have we?
I don't think so. Let me just...
so that we can occasionally test it,
Okay, good.
Just to get problems out of the way now.
Yeah. And, of course, this is in our initGL function. Remember, we used to have an emitter. All of this is now going to be gone. So let's go ahead and delete all of that out. I think that's our only problem. Almost. Oh, yes. In our draw scene, we're calling our update.
Right.
For our emitter. That's going to be changed in a minute here. I bind a texture. Going away. And I think that's everything. Good. I'm glad we got that out of the way. Just kind of compiling as we go to make sure we don't accumulate this huge pile of errors, which is not fun.
No.
So at this point, we've created all of our sliders. Now we need to go ahead and create our list box for our textures and our emitters.
That's right.
So we'll do our list textures equals add control.
Let's not forget to typecast it.
Yeah, let's typecast
to the list box.
List box. And we'll add a control. So we're going to create a new list box that is positioned. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, well, you've got...
Yeah, I got weird values, but it doesn't matter.
It's totally irrelevant.
And we're going to do pretty much the same thing for our list emitters. We're going to need to populate this in just 1 second, though.
Right.
So, okay, that's good. And then we're going to need to populate these, as I just said.
So it's a simple loop.
Since we're using vectors, it makes life really easy.
That's right. We're just going to walk through our texture list.
Yep, and then I++, and then simply do a list textures, add item. Having these custom controls just makes our life so much easier. We can simply do our name. So for our texture, we just get our name. And let's see. Let me go ahead and copy and paste this in here for our list emitters. And we do almost the same thing, except our texture list now converts over into... Well, actually, no. For our emitters, basically what we want is, we don't really have a name for each of our emitters. So what we're going to do is simply output, I'll show you. Basically, we have a char text with 80. What we're going to do is output, so do an sprintf to text, and we'll call each of the ones that are created in this list, emitter 1, emitter 2, emitter 3, etc.
Right.
And we'll simply pass I+1. Because we don't want to start out at 0.
No.
And then, yeah.
Go ahead and add that in. Just don't forget to change your for statement.
Yeah, sure. So basically, in this case, we're only starting out with 1. But if we went ahead and on the very top here added another one in, then it would automatically add in emitter 1, emitter 2 into our list emitters.
That's right.
So here, let's not forget to change this over to emitters.size. And finally, we have our 2 buttons that allow us to add and remove items from our emitters list. So simply do an add control. for our new button. And we'll have the first one labeled add. And then we'll, of course, we don't 0, 0, width, and height. There we go. And let's just copy and paste this and do the same thing here. Let's just call this delete. And then finally, we're going to call our update controls function that we just created. Because this is really important, again, because if we don't set the value for these, our slider isn't going to do anything.
That's right.
So with that,
we compiling.
Yes, compiling.
Nice.
All right, so it's looking pretty decent.
Mm-hmm.
So now, where do we go from here? Let's go ahead and go down to our initGL and go ahead and call our initialize function that we've just created. And at this point,
did you call it initialize, or did you change it to initialize controls?
Oh yeah, initialize controls. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Initialize controls.
Nice.
And let me see if this runs and check it out. We do need to make our thing a little bit
couple of things
bigger.
Real quick. Bigger window, and let's adjust that control class so that we're not pushing down, what was it, like 25 extra
Right, well, let's
units.
just make it 5.
5, yeah.
So let me come back over into here, change this back to 5.
Perfect.
And then go back up to the very top where we set our window width and height, and set that to something like 625 maybe?
650.
650, all right.
That's what we played with earlier.
Yeah.
Pretty good. Hey.
All right, except for our mission radius, which is way out there.
That was awesome.
Let me go ahead and check that in a second. But it seems that all of our selection box are working. Of course, our add and delete button don't work yet.
Right.
But otherwise, everything is in
Sliders
place.
are clickable, draggable. The borders show up over them.
Yep. So.
See, emission radius, was that the one that was acting kind of weird?
Yeah.
Okay.
I can just check that real quick to see if it was something that I totally missed. Right. No. Oh, I switched these two around. Wow. So this is supposed to be emission radius, and this one's supposed to be emission rate. And again, when I call set value, it sets the default value for that control to whatever we had just set. So if I just recompile this real quick, just to make sure everything is working good, everything is now in our range.
Beautiful.
And I can move this and right-click on it, and it goes back to what it was set at first. So now we need to start adding in some controls for these.
Yep.
And also we need to loop through our emitters so we can know exactly what's going on. Actually, let's do that first real quick here. And that's really simple. We need to go down to our draw scene.
Okay.
And right after our light here, what we need to do is add in a loop that basically just calls each of our emitters. So this is really simple. Simply do a for int I equals 0, I is less than emitters.size, simply looping through all of our emitters.
Right.
And then simply updating them. So emitters I, and simply call update.
With the SDL get ticks.
Yeah. Just like we did before, the line that we deleted just a few seconds ago.
Mm-hmm.
Let me just, let me go back up for a second. Just press Control End. Alright, so. Awesome. And also, we're going to throw in our GL enable, GL blend. Because for these guys, we do need to have that. It's very, very important. And let's see. I think that's pretty much everything we need for that. Let me go ahead and run that and see if we just have something to play with at this point. All right, check it out.
Ooh.
So stuff is going around.
Of course, there's no event handling at the moment. So.
Right, but we can change these parameters around.
There we go.
So we can already get some really crazy results from what we've already done. Oh, but notice, I made another mistake with the saturation, because when I change spread, saturation is changing as well.
Right.
So it's a good thing we're doing this, just so we can get all of these little bugs out of the way. Notice saturation is being set for both of these. So simply change this over to spread and recompile, and we should be set. Now, a few things we need to do. If I go back over, press Control F5, we need to be able to set our texture here, because obviously, like Buzz just said, there's no event handling. But otherwise, the rest of all of this is working. Is there anything else we want to test while we're in here?
Well, just go ahead and play through them real quick.
All right, so we have our live. That seems to, if we change this, it's dying immediately. Size, if we change this real small, that's good. Spread, I just checked that. Saturation, seems to be doing good. Our emission rate, definitely.
Radius, go ahead and...
Gravity, that's good. It's actually bouncing down. Our emission radius.
And good.
Excellent. Offset.
Nice.
Offset. Vortex. Crazy.
Woohoo!
And then we can set our alpha.
Nice.
So everything is working.
Perfect.
Excellent. So let's go ahead and exit out of this. And now what we need to do is create a function that handles our events for us. So we're going to create a function called handle event that does this for us. So if I just go right to, let me do it right below initialize here, or below initgl. So void handle event. And we're going to pass it. Yeah.
Lots of code.
Lots of code. Not too scary, though,
That's
code.
not too bad.
And basically this function is going to get called inside of our control loop here. Notice we said handle events here. Dink, and pass it the control that we want to handle.
Nice.
And that's it. And all the code is going to be wrapped up in this function here. So we're going to do an if control.getType equals button. Then we know we pressed add or delete.
Right.
So let's go ahead and cast it over to a button so that we can start accessing the functions
and
for a button.
We're about to have a small problem, which will be easily corrected. Yeah, you're about to need to get the label to figure out which button was just pressed.
Right. I could have, when I created the buttons, created btn, add, btn, delete, and then I could have checked with that. But what I'm going to do is something a little bit different, and that's get the label and test it with that.
Sure.
But if you remember, if we go back into our button.h here, so come over here, our label is protected, and we don't have an accessory function. So this is an easy solution. Simply do a string and say get label, and then pass this as void. Watch me do this in under a minute. So come back over to our button, paste this in here.
Faster.
All right.
Faster. Returns. Yeah.
Done.
Nice.
So if we come back in here, we're going to do if button dot get label equals add, and we obviously press the add button.
Right.
And we also want to limit it so that it doesn't put too many emitters in here. So they don't add off the list, because we don't have a scroll bar of any kind. So we'll say if it's less than 6, make sure it's less than 6, otherwise don't allow them to add any more. Else if, and then we'll handle that in just 1 second. Then do our get label equals add, or delete, excuse me.
I was going to say, they have enough knowledge now to make that scroll bar.
Yeah, they do, very much so. Make sure the size is greater than 1. We always want one emitter to stay in the scene, otherwise it doesn't make any sense.
Right.
And there we have it. So let's go ahead and implement these guys. When we add, we need to do 2 things. We need to add a new emitter into our emitter list, and we need to set its texture, and we need to add that into the list box. Oh, that's 3 things, actually. Right. Close enough. So we'll create a new emitter. So simply new emitter. And then we push this onto our list of emitters. Like so.
Set the texture.
And then set the emitter, set texture. And then we're going to set this to
whatever the list box has selected.
Right. So simply texture list, and then pass it list, lst, textures, get index. So something like so. And then what we're going to do is basically add this into the list, and we want to add it according to the current index. So if we have currently 1 emitter, we want to add emitters 1, otherwise emitters 2, emitters 3, etc. So we'll do exactly like we did in that loop, create a temporary variable called text, and then sprintf into text emitter %d, and then simply pass it I, or simply the emitter size, so emitters.size. And then just add this into our list. So emitters, add item, text.
Cool.
So with that, that's created our add. Now let's go ahead and do our delete. So we're going to loop through using our iterator and find which item in the list we need to remove, and then not forgetting to delete that emitter from our memory, because that's very important as well. Mm-hmm. So simply do let's maintain an index into this list so we know which one to delete. Then we're going to create our vector, emitter, pointer, iterator, it equals emitters.begin, and then do an it does not equal emitters.end, running out of room again, it++. Then inside of this loop, if I equals list emitters dot get index, then what we're going to do is erase this from our list, from our emitter pointer list. So erase it from here. And before we do that, let's go ahead and get that emitter pointer. So emitter equals star IT, right?
Okay.
And then what we're going to do is delete him after we erase it. So delete emitter, and then simply break out of this loop. Otherwise, we're going to increment the index. And then inside of here, we're going to remove it from our list. Remember, we created that really handy function, remove item, in our listbox class. So simply remove the item that we want. So list emitters.getIndex. And there we have it. So let me go ahead and compile this and see how this works. So at this point, we should be able to create multiple emitters. So if I just move this up here so you all can see it. If I add one, it added.
Very nice.
So I can come over here. Let me move this over in X. Oh, so look at that. We now have two emitters shooting out. Let's make sure delete works. Let me select that and delete it. And notice we have a problem here. Remember how we said before inside when we create our class to have this index pop up if we're not selecting an item. Remember that?
Yeah. Who did you just delete?
I deleted the bottommost one.
Okay.
Did it seem like we deleted the wrong one?
Oh, it just slid back.
Yeah.
Never mind.
Okay. So let me go ahead.
It's late.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and try to fix our list box problem.
Yeah.
And I think this might turn out to be a really simple fix. If I go over into here, let me see. Basically, we're removing the item of index. And if we got to that item, delete it. But here's the problem. Index, remember, that's what we called our own private member variable to set where we're currently located. And this one is conflicting with this one.
That's
we're
right.
only changing a local variable.
Right.
So what we need to do is say delete index. We'll just call that delete index. And change this over to if I equals the one we want to delete, go ahead and delete it. And then we say if index is greater than or equal to size, index equals items minus 1.
Right.
And that should fix the problem. Let's go ahead and test that out real quick. It's always good to test, make sure everything works good. So if we select our second guy here, let me move him over a little bit. No, in X. And you'll notice one thing. When we select our list box, we're still modifying the same guy.
That's right.
Because the reason for this is obviously because we don't have any event handling on this one yet. We've only handled the delete operations. But if we go ahead and delete this, notice it now works. Cool. So all is good. So let's exit out of here, go back into our SDL demo, and handle the case for our list textures and our list emitters. So we'll do an else if. Remember, we're still inside of our handle event.
Right.
So else if control equals list textures, the list of textures, then what we need to do is delete, set the current emitter's texture to equal what was newly selected. So let's first get which emitter we're dealing with here. Or current emitter, excuse me. So emitter pointer, emitter, and this is going to equal emitters, and pass it whatever is currently selected, so get index. And then we simply need to do an emitter.setTexture and set this to whatever is currently selected in our texture list. So do a list, textures, get index. So that's very simple for our list textures. Finally, we need to handle our list emitters. So if control equals list emitters, I can simply come in here and do get the current emitter. So emitter is going to equal, let's see. I'm just trying to remember here. Yeah. What I basically want to do is, when I select a new emitter, go ahead and update my controls. Actually, so let me call update controls. And let's see, do I need to do anything else in here? Let me go ahead and create a loop.
Yeah, because the big thing is we're wanting to set the texture to whatever is in that box.
Right, because basically when we reselect select a new emitter, if you will,
that's right,
the texture that's selected inside of our list box needs to change. So what we're going to do is get the current emitter. So do an int current emitter equals list emitters, get index, and then simply loop through all of our textures in our texture list. So I is less than int texture list dot size I plus plus. And then if the emitter's current texture, emitter,
it's basically equal to the one in the list.
Right. So if his texture equals the texture list at I.
Right.
Then what we need to do is set the list texture, the list box's current texture, to I.
Exactly. So basically, as you change through emitters, and each emitter has a different texture set. As you click between emitters, the selection is automatically going to change in the textures list box.
Exactly. So let me go ahead and see if that compiles. Excellent. I made a mistake. Emitters. Let me just change that over. Excellent. So let's go ahead and test this out. So let's see if changing the texture works. So change this to flare. Ooh, look at that. Working. Change it to flame. Nice. Whoa. Change it to smoke. Awesome. Very so cool. Everything is working. Now let's check. Let me move this over to here. Add a new emitter. Select this one. Notice the offset just changed. When I change between these two, by calling update controls, it points all of these sliders to the right guy. So I can now change this one to move over, or I can come over to here and change this one. Now I'm modifying two separate ones. And if I come in here, change this to star, notice how the list box now changes between star and smoke. So very nice. With that, wow, is there anything else we need to include?
Right offhand, nothing I can think of.
Yeah, basically what we have here is, well, everything we need to basically control various
the fire.
emitters.
Make a nice looking fire real quick.
So let me select a fire. Let me move that back over just a little bit. Okay, and let me change the emission rate to something a little bit more scary. Saturation, let me totally desaturate it. Let me set the emission radius up just a little bit. Turn the size down, and turn the size range up a little bit. Let me turn the alpha down. And I think I want to turn the size down just a little bit more. Something like that, maybe?
Torch and kill. Bring your life down a little bit, maybe.
Yeah, agreed. Oh, wait.
Yeah, there we go.
Maybe a little bit higher.
A little campfire going.
I like that. And let me turn the alpha down just a little bit more so we can get something like that. I like that.
Very cool.
So we can create fire. We can create our sparkly guy here. We can set his spread to something crazy. In fact, we can move him into this one and maybe make his spread really high and then make his size really small. So basically like sparks coming out. We can move it up a little bit. So sparks coming out of the fire, essentially.
There you go.
So lots of different things we can do with this.
Go ahead and hit delete with emitter 2 selected just to make sure that, dink, the right one's gone. Excellent.
Excellent. So I think that's everything.
I think so.
Wow.
So with that, we now have an application that gives you pretty full control over these particles.
Yeah, no kidding.
We do have one other option if we want to do this in the next video.
Right.
And you want to show them what the problem is right now?
Right. If we select our smoke, you'll notice it's completely white.
Right.
And what if you would want to, say, make it so that it darkens everything else? And basically what this is going to require us to do is add an attribute to our texture class that allows us to set what kind of mode it is. Is it regular blending like our fire here, or do we want it to darken it?
Two emitters real quick. You could show them with the...
So if we have our flame here, and then for our second emitter, we can change this to smoke. Let me pull the saturation down a little bit. You'll notice that it's brightening everything.
Right.
Well, instead, we might want this to darken things.
Exactly.
And in the next lesson, we're going to show you exactly how to do that so that we can make things like fire and smoke.
Right. Now, the only reason I asked Joel if we actually wanted to do this, because this is going to be kind of like a bonus treat for you guys.
It is kind of like a little bonus. So, it's not too complicated, but it is an extra tidbit.
That's very true.
Yep.
So with that, we now have a fully functioning particle engine. And let's go ahead and move on to that little bonus video. So that's going to wrap up this one. Thanks a lot.